We're here at the head of the Little Tennessee, just below the junction of Beatty's Creek and Wolf Fork in Raven Gap, Georgia. And this is essentially, the first mile of river as it becomes a river on its 55 miles of travel as a free-flowing river till it's impounded behind Fontana Reservoir and then is impounded totally on through the mountains into Tennessee. But it's a very attractive mountain stream, and it'll be very impressive to see what the stream becomes. Here it's at the point where it just about enters Macon County. Where it leaves Macon County, it's a huge, huge river. The Little Tennessee here, birthed in Georgia, as we'll see as we go on through the day, becomes the Noah's Ark of rivers in the Blue Ridge. It is has more diversity of aquatic life. It has a more intact ecological community than any other stretch of river in the entire Tennessee Valley. And the 5-state Tennessee Valley, the Tennessee River Valley, is the most biologically diverse river system on Earth outside of the tropics. And the Little Tennessee, particularly North Carolina, is the gem of the entire Tennessee Valley. The south to north oriented Little Tennessee Valley only recently has been recognized as a very significant regional flyway for birds. The Tessentee Farm preserve we're going shortly, that's when we first started seeing it. It started to hold birding days, and the bird list on Tessentee Farm very quickly jumped to 100 species. And it's amazing in the spring, it's just all these migratory birds that are coming up out of the tropics. There's 4,000 years of documented agriculture down around Cowee. The early agriculture was focused at nurturing the high protein hickory nuts and some of the high oil dock seeds, the cousins to the quinoa. And then of course corn came into this valley more or less 1,500 years ago. But agriculture in these valley bottoms is not a recent phenomenon. This is a traditional native phenomena. Now the way we do it now is obviously a bit different. And the loss of agriculture in this valley is a true, not just environmental, but it's a true cultural tragedy, because we have, such a continuity that we're at the verge of losing if we allow it to be paved over. Here at the head of the Little Tennessee, which you enter it at Mountain City, Georgia, coming up through Raven Gap and Dillard. This is the crossroads where the trading paths from time immemorial entered this valley. It was one of the principal trading paths, communication highways between the coastal communities of the Carolinas and Georgia and the interior, the Tennessee, Mississippi Valley. And this valley was a center of diplomacy for a long, long time amongst Native American peoples as they met and interchanged ideas and products. In the 18th century, this valley became a key center of diplomacy and writing the future history of our country, where first the imperial ambitions of the British Empire in the south, in the southern part of North America, unfolded in this valley. And there were armies that entered this valley right through here and marched across these lands of Raven Gap in 1760 and 61. And then more dramatically, frankly, 15 years later, in September of 1776, it was through this pathway that the South Carolina Colonial Army came in this three-pronged attack on Cowee, which was a preemptive attack, the first move of the American Revolution, a scorched earth policy to take care of the concern of a pan-British Indian slave alliance to put down the colonial ambitions that our forefathers had at the birth of this country.
So even after the French and Indian War, where the British were fighting the Cherokees, within 15 years the British were going to ally with...
The Cherokee were very smart, adaptive people. On Cowee Mound in 1730, Alexander Cummings was a British fellow who called a council and claimed to represent the British Crown and called a Council of Cherokee. And you may have seen this old engraving from that council. 7 Cherokee men went back to London with Alexander Cummings, and they were the toast of the town in London. And these were Macon County boys, these Cherokee guys. They were invited back and they met the royalty. They were the toast of the town in London. They just saw the British as another neighbor that to work, to get along with, and also as a way as they realized the real issue was the encroachment of the white colonists coming in. And unfortunately, the Cherokee were on the wrong side again from just a military point of view. In 1776, the British were of no help when this army of 6,500 men came out of Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and North Georgia to basically, as a huge preemptive strike to decimate the Cherokee nation as a fighting force. And from there, the colonists could turn their attention to taking on the British, which was more a coastal issue. In Spring Ridge Dairy here, in December of 2004, the Land Trust for Little Tennessee was able to purchase a working farm conservation easement. We bought the development rights essentially using a combination of federal, and we hope some state funding to come, and private funding, which was very key to put it together, to work with the farmer to lock in the fact that this would always, the future options for this land are limited to farmland, or it cannot be subdivided and built on. Maybe parkland at some point, you never know. But 1760 was the first incursion where the British Army, 1,200 redcoats, I think, with 600 Carolina frontiersmen marched in this valley, and further upstream from here, north of here, they were hit by the Cherokee. 19 soldiers were killed in that first attack. They were basically freaked out and routed, and they hightailed it out of the valley. The next year, in 1761, an army close to twice that size, swelled by more British recruits, Scottish Highlanders actually, but swelled by a lot of colonial men, came into this valley. And here, on the site of the Spring Ridge Dairy, was where unfolded what we know as the Second Battle of Ochoa, in which the Cherokee were overrun, and that army proceeded up this valley, burned out all the towns, and crossed the Cowee Mountains and went up the Tuckasegee River and destroyed all the Cherokee towns for the first time. And that was in 1761. The autumn of 1999, our land trust consummated its first land protection project, which was here. This is what we call the Tessentee Farm Preserve. 64 acres located at where Tessentee Creek flows into the Little Tennessee River. So we're near the community of Otto, North Carolina. Tessentee drains off the backside of the Fishhawk Mountains, just over the ridge from Turtle Pond. Those who know Jones Knob and that, or when you're there, you're looking down on Tessentee Valley. The Cherokee peoples were a river-dwelling people, and their lifestyle, their artisan products were based heavily on plants that were river bottom plants. The black walnut and the white walnut for dye are river bottom plants, principally. The river cane, obviously. And as our land trust has been, as we protect land along the Little Tennessee River, we find that we're protecting basically the heart of the original Cherokee homeland. It's only in recent generations that the Cherokee, the Eastern Band, have been mountain-dwelling people. River cane once was one of the most, river cane breaks, they were called, were one of the great abundant habitat types in eastern North America that have been almost extinguished. It's estimated that there is less than 2% of the original canebrake area left that there was at the settlement period. say in the early 1800s. And the reason that's pretty clear, good cane ground is good corn ground. And our Euro ancestors were pretty ambitious about clearing good corn ground. River cane, I understand, certainly 2 centuries ago was the most important commercial, well, the most important economic plant for the Cherokee people. It was a construction material for housing, making mats for bedding, making baskets from the cradle to the grave. I understand that young, Cherokee infants would be in cane baskets, and in burial cane baskets would be used. From a historic snapshot point of view, I think, the journals of the campaigns of 1760-61, of the terror of the British Army being ambushed by Cherokee, finding themselves in river cane patches, very tropical feeling environments. It's so thick in there that you can just envision if a trading road was going through here, that there could be Cherokee warriors 20 feet in there and not be seen. Of course, the river cane was used for making weapons, blowguns, larger cane, and for darts and arrows. It's here studying on developing the management plan of this property, studying on the cultural history is where I first came to appreciate what unfolded in this valley in 1760 and 1761. In the 1760 First Battle of Ochoa, the one in which the British and colonial forces were routed, it may have occurred, spilled up into here. There's diaries from a soldier in that campaign. His diary spoke of marching through a large bottomland through river cane. On this property, we do know in 1776 the South Carolina Army that marched on Cowee under General Williamson camped here at Tessentee. So his army, which was something like 1,400 men, camped across these slopes. We know when William Bartram came into the valley in 1775, he spent the night in a hut of a trapper at the foot of Tessentee. We know across that way, roughly where you're shooting, it's really a little behind the cedars to see there's a rise out there on the edge of that big bottomland. It's a 6,000-year-old settlement site, a middens, where the early settlements in this valley were people that were they lived around the wetland bottoms where they could, they had all the wildlife gathered and could be harvesting the grains of the grasses that grew around the wetlands, and of course had waterfowl and fish and mussels and of course deer and on and on. I haven't mentioned about the deer trade. The trade that brought so many people through this valley in the 18th century was focused on deer skin. Starting around around 1690s, one finds studying the commercial history of Charleston that deer skin became an important export product to England. It became a huge product in the 18th century. There were years in the 1730s and 40s where the value of deer skins shipped out of the port of Charleston exceeded the sum of value of all other products out of the South. At that period of history, most of the American deer skin were coming out of the South, and the deer out of Kentucky, Tennessee, the skins that were being shipped to Charleston came through this valley. And the deer skin trade was the commercial engine of the southern colonies and of the Native Americans in that period. And of course, the term of dollar being a buck comes from that when trade was based on a deer skin. William Bartram, it's pretty delightful reading his accounts of coming in here. He was just like a 20-year-old, give or take, in the spring of 1775. But this is 14 years after that army of 1761 burned out the towns, and Bartram writes of being waved over to come in to have dinner and sit on the door stoop of these Cherokee homes, and was just embraced and spent several weeks in Cowee. And you think, You know, a generous landscape like this creates a generous people. As far as the fence line, that was the original Gibson Bottoms acquisition, what was going to be the RV park. Basically, this whole bottom land was, and that bluff behind was going to be a 200-unit town of RVs and a couple of cabins. From that fence on to another fence, the land trust just acquired. But we're looking upriver towards Franklin, and jumping over Franklin, we're looking into the Fishhawk Mountains. We're looking on the right side of the Kulisage Gorge, basically, in those mountains up there. Fishhawk, an osprey. See them more and more here in Little Tennessee. I don't know if it's that one bird or a couple, but we're entering the area of Cowee now, and we're entering the most sacred part of the valley, really. But there we're looking at what folks call a Cherokee fish trap, a fish weir. Man-made structure. Who knows how old it is, but certainly 1,000 years ago the population density was quite high around here. 1,500 years ago people were cultivating corn all over, and these weirs were built basically for harvesting fish. This reach of river, this 25 miles from below Franklin to the head of Fontana, has some 60 species of fish native to it and 8 species of freshwater mussels. That's the highest, the most intact cluster of mussel diversity in the state of North Carolina, and that comes up to close to half the native freshwater fish species in the state of North Carolina are in this. And there are fishes second to no tropical aquarium fish in June, and in the summer breeding period, the Tennessee shiners or the war paint shiners. They're just brilliant. They're amazing to see. At the turn of the 20th century, in 1900, Cowee district in Macon County had, by census, the largest rural black community west of the Balsams in North Carolina. It was this church, the Pleasant Hill, is the only remaining structure of that community. There was a school behind this church that one can find, remnant foundation, and that, based on my understanding, that black community came from 2 families that were slave families. There were 4 or 5 large landowners around Cowee, plantations basically, that had slaves, and their offspring, of course, were part of that black community. But it was also made up of offspring from some free black families that were. Cowee had free blacks at the time of the Civil War. From at least one story where people from Burke County, slave owners who left Burke County and moved up here and freed their slaves because they didn't believe in. But also, you know, talking to the historians, there were African Americans trading at Cowee back at the time of the Revolution, so there very likely were some black settlers in this district early on, as there were white settlers. The Cowee Mound is on the Hall Farm. In September of 1776, in that huge campaign, which was targeted on Cowee, the North Carolina Army under Rutherford, there was a man on that, a Presbyterian minister named Hall at that army, who preached a sermon of victory on the Cowee Mound. It was a sermon of manifest destiny, where that army had conquered the Indian menace, and I'd say in their eyes. But interestingly, in the 1820s, when this became part of the state of North Carolina, it became legal to have title to land. It was a Hall who ended up with title to the mound. Here in the Little Tennessee Valley, upstream of the reservoir lakes, there are 4 known mound sites, as far as I understand. This Cowee is the biggest and the most intact, but Niquosi, which is where the town of Franklin established, the Cowee Mound across from the hot spot now. There was a mound at Cowee, which was excavated when they built US 441 South back in the early 70s, and that's one of the best recorded excavation of a Mississippian site in the Blue Ridge. And then there's a mound site still in Rabun and Dillard in the bottomlands down below, back below the Piggly Wiggly store. They placed their council houses on the mounds, at least in this part of the country they did. They were not burial mounds. But anyway, the Cherokees built their towns at mound sites. Mound sites were just settlement sites from time immemorial, really. Here, Cowee, this mound was built not on the floodplain. It was built on a finger of a ridge sticking out, and the river runs around it, and yet it was built up from that. Cowee was the principal town of the Mountain Cherokee people. William Bartram visited here in 1775, wrote a fairly large description. At that time, it was 100 homes on either side of the river around this mound. The council house was on the mound, going out about a 2-mile radius in all directions. Anywhere that was good corn land, there were patches of corn and squash and beans. The Cherokee were town people, and they went out to their fields. From the 1820s until now, this mound and much of the town site around has been the Hall Farm. And we're looking at a span of 180 years, which is a huge legacy of its own. And the Hall family's legacy was they guarded this mound. There are stories of, there was Miss Catherine Hall Porter, who died a couple of years ago, was the last of the Halls owning the property. There's stories of her sitting with a shotgun, not allowing these people from Tennessee that came and tried to dig in the mound. They protected it. So, here it is, 2005, and the future of the Cowee Mound and much of the Cowee town site is up for grabs once again, as it was when the state was created in 1820s. But now the pressures are so much greater, and the uniqueness of this thing just demands a solution. It's a quote. "Here terminates the great valley of Cowee, one of the most charming natural mountain landscapes anywhere to be seen." It was written by William Bartram in the Travels of William Bartram on his visit here in 1775. The Travels of William Bartram in the late 18th, early 19th century were a bestseller in Europe. Remember this morning we shot the Little Tennessee River about where it entered Macon County. We were looking at the Little Tennessee River just upstream from where it leaves Macon County. There is no other river in eastern North America that gets so big so fast and so dynamic. Little Tennessee drains the highest rainfall area in the east, the southern Blue Ridge Escarpment, Highlands Plateau, Scaly Mountain, Raven Ball, and the southern Nantahala. The further downstream we come, the wilder it gets and the higher quality the water gets, the higher quality the aquatic habitat gets. Again, I know of no other river system that has that characteristic. We're in the upper portion of the Needmore Tract. The Needmore Tract refers to a 4,500 acre property that was acquired beginning in the 1930s through the 1950s with the intent to build one last hydroelectric facility on the Little Tennessee. This river, 10 miles downstream, falls into Fontana Reservoir, and from there on to Little Tennessee for the next 90 miles is a deadened river under Fontana, Chioa, Calderwood, Chilhowie, and the ultimate, the Tellico Dam. But and there were plans to build one last dam at Needmore, which would have backed the river up to close to Franklin. Needmore is one large tract of 4,000 acres. We're in the midst of that, with 12 miles of river flowing through it. In its entirety, the Needmore Tract, which was acquired by the state of North Carolina in January of 2004. In its entirety, and protected 26 miles of river frontage, 74 miles of tributary stream frontage flowing into the river, dozens of wetlands, many archaeological sites. The river downstream of Franklin is, it's got tremendous diversity of fishes and a lot of beauty, a lot of extraordinary things for people to appreciate, but particularly those that are fishermen appreciate a lot the smallmouth bass. It's called the premier smallmouth bass fishery in the Blue Ridge. It's a great wading river. It's a great snorkeling river. You put on a mask and you see stuff under that water second to no tropical aquarium fishes. Back in the 80s and 90s, increasingly this area was being recognized for what it was. It's the remaining library of what Blue Ridge rivers should look like. Every species that should be here appears to be here and healthily reproducing. And the entire Tennessee Valley system, which is the most species-rich river system on Earth outside of the tropics, this area in the Needmore has consistently scored the highest in the annual monitoring of biotic integrity.